Hello and welcome to Civil Discourse. My name is Ken Hurley and this program is sponsored by Civication Incorporated. Civication Incorporated promotes civil learning and civic engagement, and you can check us out on our website civication.org. In the studio today to discuss crime in Jacksonville and other troubling incidences with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, the Fraternal Order of the Police, and the citizens at large is the chairman and professor of criminology at the University of North Florida, Dr. Michael Hallett. Professor, it's good to see you. Thank you for being here. You are the go-to guy for the mayor, the go-to guy for many other people in town. This is what I hear, this is what I read. You're so modest that you don't necessarily think you might not be the go-to guy, but I know you are. When there's an issue relative to why we have such a high crime rate, why so many troubling things are happening in Jacksonville, people come to you for your opinions. You sit on the Jacksonville Journey. Jacksonville Journey started about 4 years ago, I understand, in 2006. Where are we at with the journey? Have we reached our destination?
Well, thanks for having me, Ken. No, we've just begun our journey. The conceptualization of the journey started about 4 years ago in the aftermath of Dershana Davis's murder in 2006 and Shanice Holmes's murder just before that. Two children, two young girls who had been killed in the crossfire on the illicit drug market wars on the north side of Jacksonville. And so the city of Jacksonville has led the state of Florida in homicide for 11 straight years now, including this year. Even though crime is down, we still lead the state in homicide. Jacksonville still leads the state in violent index crime and has led the state of Florida in violent index crime for over 20 years.
Well, what's an index crime? Something they're tracking?
Yeah, the 7 or 8 most serious crimes that the FBI lists as tracks.
Rape would be one of them.
Rape,
armed robbery,
homicide, battery, arson. So the most important crimes.
And we fit where?
Number 1.
In the entire state
in
of
the
Florida?
entire state, correct.
Why is that? Why are we having such a problem with our citizens?
Well, you know, we have large pockets of neighborhoods that match all 4 risk factors: poverty, breakdown of family, which is the single most important driver, I think, school failure, and illicit drug markets. So we've got neighborhoods that are saturated in all of those. We've got a 71% dissolution of marriage rate in Duval County, which is astronomically high. And so we have some real serious problems that contribute to violence and crime.
So are you suggesting if the family stayed intact, we had a better school system, and we had better opportunities for jobs in Jacksonville, that perhaps that we would no longer be number 1?
Well, yeah, that is what I think. In fact, you know, to me, the answer to the crime problem is look where crime is low. What's going on in neighborhoods where crime is low as compared to where crime is high. And where crime is low, you tend to have intact families, successful schools, you do not have poverty, and as a result of that, you don't have illicit drug markets and a wage economy and off-the-books labor market economy that is so prevalent in impoverished neighborhoods.
Well, what is the journey doing?
Well, the journey is the first comprehensive look at crime that I think we've ever taken in Jacksonville. And unfortunately, it took the tragic murders of 2 young children to initiate the journey. And, you know, the journey is really, in my view, kind of a minimum down payment on the agenda that we need to undertake in order to turn crime around in Jacksonville relative to the rest of the state. But the journey is a comprehensive program-focused agenda targeted in specific areas of the city on specific issues: school failure, helping ex-offenders not reoffend, certain health care initiatives, helping ex-offenders find jobs, those kinds of things. And the reason helping ex-offenders is important is that, for example, 76% of homicide offenders in Jacksonville have prior felony convictions. So the reason the journey is important is that dealing with crime in Jacksonville is really not primarily a law enforcement issue, in my opinion.
Not solely.
Not solely
Right,
a law enforcement issue. It's more of a desistance issue, a rehabilitation issue. The people who are going to show up early and often. It's not really a problem of apprehension. They have on average 7 prior convictions. The problem is rehabilitation and turning the crime situation around for people.
Rehabilitation implies that they were once habilitated and that they were once an upstanding citizen. Is that what
It's a good point. It's a very good point. I mean, when you come from failing families and failing schools, you know, over 2/3 of people in the American prison system are functionally illiterate, can't read and write. The vast majority of people in Florida state prisons do not have a high school education. And so, yes, all of these things go together. And in my opinion, the single most important of those is breakdown of family.
We've gotten away from trade schools, right? We don't do that so much any longer, where we have mandated that everybody must become an academic individual going through high school and pass certain tests, FCAT and all that. And it's just not made for everybody. We used to, 40 years ago, have trade schools for people who wanted to become a plumber or an electrician, and they could not go and have it be equivalent of a high school degree.
Yeah.
Would that be something of use, or are we doing that and I'm unaware of it?
Well, I tend to agree with you that we've over-intellectualized education, and with the FCAT, for example, with these high-stake tests, which actually push students out of the educational process.
That's right.
Rather than enhance
And
their
don't give them
educational.
any sense of hope or any sense of purpose, any sense that they can achieve something.
Right.
And there's so many tasks at hand that need to be done in terms of servicing our community. Why don't we start teaching more of that?
Yeah.
And,
I'm all for testing, by the way. I think you can use these diagnostic tests to establish baselines, and as long as children are learning in schools, whether they pass a test or not is a separate question from whether they're learning, it seems to me. So that if you want to tie teacher performance, for example, to outcomes, do a baseline test, see where students are, and then see if they've learned from the starting point that they arrived at. So I just want to say I'm for testing. I'm just not for all high stakes testing.
Right. So the journey is, what would you say is something specific that is good that has come out of the journey? Other than this is the first time we've had this great study, what are some of the details and the specifics that you see that are very beneficial?
Well, for example, we have 40,000 children in the city of Jacksonville, most of whom are right there in the core of the city. 40,000 middle school and elementary school children who live in poverty in Jacksonville, and only 30% of those children who qualify for free and reduced lunch have anywhere to go after school. So one of the top priorities of the journey was to make sure that every middle and elementary school, public school in Jacksonville, in Health Zone 1, in the core deteriorating center of the city, has a team up after school program in Health Zone 1, and we achieved that. Every middle and elementary school in Health Zone 1, now as a result of the Jacksonville journey, has an after school program with a snack and homework activity for the children to go after school. But there's a 67% gap in service for after-school programs in Jacksonville. That is to say, almost 70% of poor children in Jacksonville still today have no place to go after school, no structured after-school resources for them. And so, as I say, we've made a minimum down payment, but that's one concrete achievement, I think, of the journey.
A down payment, the journey started off being funded to the tune of $30-some-odd million, and where are we at now with funding?
Well, I think the first year budget cycle we were at 31 million. The second year, you know, with the budget crisis that the city finds itself in, we were 19 million. We're begging this year for 12 million. So we've pared it by half in just 3 years, and it's nowhere near enough, of course. But there have been some real accomplishments of the journey, and hopefully we'll be able to continue the programmatic initiatives that we've undertaken.
Right. In terms of law enforcement, I mean, we have people that do some pretty horrible things in terms of robbery and murder are citizens that grow up without any hope, without any education, no jobs, and they don't really see any other way out, and so they turn to crime. That might be oversimplifying it, I get that. But what happens when law enforcement does things that they shouldn't be doing and sets an example that people see, and they observe the police officer who are supposed to be serving and protecting being corrupt or abusing their authority, abusing the public trust?
Yeah.
When is it okay for a police officer to break the law?
Well, obviously never. And I think there are a couple issues floating around in your question, and one is when police use excessive force, for example, that's illegal. And in interrogations, for example, police can misinform people they're interrogating to try to trip them up or get them to confess and give them misinformation, which ought to be disallowed in my view.
Well, it's okay for the police to lie during the interrogation, but if you lie to the police, you can be charged with obstruction of justice or filing a false police report, just like you can't lie to a federal agent under Title 18, Section 1001. If you lie to a federal agent, you can get in big trouble. You can go to jail. That's what they got Martha Stewart on. But it's okay for them to lie to you. Doesn't this inherently set up a system of distrust?
Absolutely. And I think the key to mitigating public resistance is an accountability structure, whether it's on use of force or taping. I think all interrogations should be videotaped and archived and used as part of the formal record.
Are we doing that in Jacksonville? I know we're supposed to be.
I think we are, as a matter of fact. I think today all interrogations have to be videotaped, and that's a new thing. But yeah, and that should be part of the public record, not just part of the preliminary hearing or part of a plea negotiation, which is not public.
Well, we're going to get ready to take a short break. When we come back, I want to follow up with some more of the things that we're talking about relative to some specific cases. I want to talk about the incident on Bay Meadows Road at the Wendy's and that Bonnie and Clyde-like shooting into the car, which was a horrible, horrible incident. You're watching a program called Civil Discourse. My name is Ken Hurley. Take a look at this. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Civil Discourse. My name is still Ken Hurley, and you're watching a program sponsored by Civication Incorporated. Check us out on our Facebook page. If you like it, click the like button. We'd love to have you part of our family. We're talking with Dr. Michael Hallett from the University of North Florida. He's the chairman of the criminology department over there, and he teaches criminology and other good stuff. And you're also the director of the Center for Criminal Justice Policy and Research. Right. Which is, you can learn more about that at Dr. Hallett's website at UNF. There's good work and good pages and information there. But we're talking now about crime in Jacksonville and some of the reasons for crime and why we're number one, and a horrible stat, nothing to be proud of, in the murder rate of Jacksonville. We're the murder capital of Florida. But what happens when the police do something they shouldn't be doing? There's an internal affairs review board that I understand does not have any civilians on it. There's also a district attorney who can make some review. There's a grand jury who can make a review. There's even the FBI if they can come in and have some oversight. But there's no civilian review board, right? There's no civilians on this. Is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? It's been my observation, and I don't know the stat, and maybe you'll have the stat, that everything that has gone through an internal review has been cleared. Every officer has been cleared. That's batting 1,000 for the officer. Is that credible?
It's not true that every instance of use of force has been cleared internally by JSO. In fact, they have found instances of excessive use of force and called it that. I do still think, however, that there needs to be some external oversight or involvement, some more deeply elaborated external oversight of the Response to Resistance Board, RTR, Response to Resistance Review process, as they call it at JSO. And the incident on Bay Meadows, I think, reinforces the need for some external accountability on the part of JSO. So
That incident on Bay Meadows is just one in a long string of horrible incidents that happened from JSO. But this one is a pretty egregious one. I don't know if the officers knew there were children in the backseat of the car. They didn't know, but they did know there was a hostage there. And the accounts that I've read, it was almost as if they fired like that scene in Bonnie and Clyde, where just bullet after bullet, 20-plus shots went into the car wantonly. How can this not be considered an excessive use of force?
Well, in that case, we don't know all the facts on that case yet.
That's what everybody says. There was,
the sheriff did make a statement, I think, in which he basically said that he thought there would be found to be violations of policy there. To me, the issue is not use of force per se. I think in the vast, vast majority of incidents where excessive force, where force is used, they're justifiable uses of force. I think that having an external member, either a law enforcement external member on Jacksonville Sheriff's Office response to resistance process, can only enhance the legitimacy of use of force, and I think we need that. The reason the Bay Meadows incident, I think, is of interest is that the FBI has said that it's going to oversee the investigation into that use of force. And in the aftermath of that, Sheriff Rutherford himself said that he welcomed the external review. Mm-hmm. Well, many people in the African American community in Jacksonville have been calling for an external member on Jacksonville Sheriff's Office response to resistance process, and the sheriff shot it down. He said no. And so if the sheriff really does welcome external oversight of use of force, then why not take this as an occasion to invite an external member from FDLE or some other law enforcement fully trained person?
What's the downside from the sheriff's perspective? It can only help enhance the trust that he so desperately needs in the community he's charged with protecting and serving.
I agree. I think the sheriff would say, and does say, that, well, our process works, that we don't need any external accountability. Well, I just disagree with that.
Right.
I think that, if you look at the micro dynamics of law enforcement in Jacksonville, we have a lot of very unique characteristics of law enforcement in Jacksonville. We're the largest city in the United States with only one police department, Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, which is a problem.
That's because of the consolidation.
That's because of consolidation. Every other consolidated government in the United States has a metropolitan police department with an appointed police chief as well as an elected sheriff, which gives you more levers of accountability on police behavior, not just use of force, but in police community relations. And so for that and many other reasons, I think at a bare minimum, we need an external law enforcement member on Jacksonville Sheriff's Office use of force board.
Mm-hmm. Would you be in favor of a separate board, a civilian review board with subpoena power?
I don't think so. I think the research shows pretty consistently that civilian review boards affirm use of force at an even higher rate than police review boards do. Usually civilian review boards come about as a result of race relations issues between the police and the community, and that the civilian review boards are really about something other than use of force. They're about larger racial dynamics, political dynamics in the community, and we've got plenty of those in Jacksonville as well. Mm-hmm. But I think at a minimum, whatever you think about a civilian review board, what needs to happen is that a modification to JSO's existing RTR, Response to Resistance Board, needs to take place with the addition of an external law enforcement trained member who reports to the community as an autonomous, separate individual who works with the community and can defend Jacksonville Sheriff's Office and its use of force, which I want to emphasize 99.9% of the time is legitimate. And so I really don't say this as coming from the perspective of I disagree with JSO. Most of the time I entirely agree, and an external member would only further validate that use of force.
Well, in terms of putting an external member on, that seems like a good idea, but when you say it should be somebody from law enforcement, I can understand that because they have some knowledge and the workings of what goes on in law enforcement. But what does that do to the perception of the so-called blue code of silence, where because there's another law enforcement, they're a band of brothers and sisters who will be quiet and get together? And
it leaves it in place. But I think that it could be done in such a way that an external member would report to a community, a civilian board of the NAACP or some other collaborative body of citizens, private citizens. And I think that would enhance the public perception of use of force, particularly on the north side. I mean, one of the things we know through our research at UNF is that, and elsewhere, the African American community has a very different sort of set of public relations issues with the sheriff's office than the South Side, than the white community does. So, and I think those things need to be balanced, because the vast majority of interactions that the African American community has with local government are with the police department.
But isn't it true, I mean, you mentioned white and black and the north side and all, but isn't it true that one of the primary determining factors of violent crime isn't necessarily race, but poverty?
Right. Well, for crime in general, most of the single largest portion of violent crime we have in Jacksonville is illicit drug market violence. In 2006 and 2007, that's real spike in violence that we had was really illicit drug market violence, which was, in my opinion, only exacerbated by law enforcement. But we have lots of different kinds of violence in the city. Domestic violence, we have spates of random violence, and it's spread out. You have violence everywhere in the city. But the thing I would point out about race is, in terms of crime, lower class white neighborhoods have higher crime rates than middle class black neighborhoods. So it really is primarily a function of poverty. Poverty is a real thing, and poverty does drive bad things happening in the community.
It goes back to, it starts with a good family, but not everybody comes from a good family. Then it goes into a good school system, but not everybody has the privilege of going to a good school or a good school system or to a private school. And then it goes from there, getting a good education, to hopefully getting a decent job and retaining one's dignity.
Indeed. I think the single most important factor is family breakdown. We have a 71% dissolution of marriage rate in Jacksonville. And that's a the single largest factor in our chronically leading the state of Florida in both crime and violent crime and murder.
Well, is it so much the family breakdown, or just having children that are necessarily not wanted?
Well, you have disaffected citizens, you have people in isolation. Violence is really a product of isolation, social isolation. And when illicit drug markets get involved, tap into that isolation, economic isolation, violence is used as a sort of control mechanism of the marketplace. And then when you throw law enforcement into that mix, that only exacerbates the violence because of the way that interrogations and other tactics are used to control drug crime.
Are there any programs in the Jacksonville Journey that teaches young parents how to be a better parent?
We don't currently have any parenting resources in the Jacksonville Journey. And I'm concerned about the Journey in the sense that we've now lost more than half of our budget from when we started. It's still a vitally important set of programs that we're working with. There's an oversight committee. I'm on the oversight committee, and if a program is not working, we say so and hold it accountable. We take money from programs all the time. The programs are structured on a pay-as-you-go basis, so they only get paid for services they deliver. They're usually in government work. There's a whole grant money, piece of grant money given, and we see if they spend it. In the Journey's case, they only spend it as they go. And so it's a good program worthy of continuing.
One of the things I've noticed and I've questioned, and you probably have something to say about the pursuit policy regarding police. It seems to me, for example, if it comes over the radio that the suspect is armed, they're going to pursue with all the vim and vigor the police pursue with. But there was a case where a pair of jeans were stolen. Now, I don't know if that person had a gun or he didn't have a gun or what that situation was, but it seems that some minor infraction should not be escalated by a police pursuit in so many of the situations where maybe it's better not to pursue people and make that the better part of their discretion. Is there any validity in that, having the police decide not to actually pursue somebody?
Well, that's a tough call, I think, because I believe the situation in that case was that the officer knew that over dispatch, it came out that the suspect was armed. And if he's running through a crowded area, I have no problem with use of force for an armed suspect, personally. If somebody pulls a weapon on a police officer, that's going to end in a disastrous outcome for that individual.
Absolutely, I understand that. That's the system that we have set up. I mean, you could just take an aggressive step towards a police officer and it's not going to be necessarily a pleasant outcome, whether you're armed or not. But I think there might be some situations where if they chose not to pursue and deal with the person in a different situation, a different setting, some of these horrible situations where people have been killed by the police who maybe should not have been killed by the police, even though they're cleared by internal, their lives might be spared. I mean, there was Singletary, an elderly gentleman on the north side, 80 years old.
Well, he himself was armed. He came out with a shotgun.
But he didn't know they were police. They were undercover police.
Yeah, that was a so-called reverse sting, and I agree with you that was inappropriate. To me, I have no sympathy for armed suspects. That's just my view.
Right.
I do have a problem, though, with pursuit policy where, for example, an officer does an abrupt U-turn and then slams into a gentleman driving, going through an intersection and kills him. Right. That's another reason we need more oversight and more structured sort of involvement. And that's one of the reasons I suggested an appointed police chief, because for example, if you disagree with JSO's response to resistance board, or if you disagree with their police pursuit policy, if you have an appointed chief, that's a 30-second conversation. The mayor walks into the sheriff's office and says, I want you to change your policy, and it's done.
Well, that's a whole other set of discussions. We're all out of time. I appreciate your time here.
Thank you, Ken.
Michael Hallett from the University of North Florida, Professor Chairman of Criminology Department. My name is Ken Hurley. You're watching Civil Discourse. Really appreciate it. We'll see you next time. That's great. A lot of information. I hope you'll come back. Thank you for participating in Civil Discourse, a program that discusses controversial issues in a civil manner. Let us know, friend or foe, we want you on our show. You may contact us in the following ways. Please email your comments to me, Ken, at civication.org, or snail mail at 4830 Atlantic Boulevard, Jacksonville, Florida, 32207, or call us at 904-591-7634. Civication Incorporated is a nonprofit, nonpartisan educational organization.
You're watching Local Access, Channel 29, exclusive programming for Comcast subscribers.